Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kakis. Today's episode is titled Customer Centricity with Hannah Bloking. Hannah is a senior program manager, briefing strategist in the Executive Briefing Center at AWS. Over the last 8 years, she's been a top performing sales engineer at Oracle, Sugar CRM, Sprinklr, ServiceNow, and HighSpot. Hannah is extremely passionate and loves solving complex business challenges, and she's customer obsessed. You'll hear that today. Hannah's been a key contributor for the PreSales Collective, and I'll save that for our podcast. But I love customer centricity, really love this topic. Hannah's extremely passionate about it. I don't want to give too much away just yet, but I think we all know that customer expectations are changing. The concept of customer centricity is more important than ever. But I dare to question, are we actually customer centric? Are we doing things in customer centricity in mind? And today's podcast will really talk on that subject. So enjoy. Hey, Hannah, how are you?
Hey, James. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so glad we're doing this podcast together.
Me too. Feels like it's about time.
It's about time for sure. Well, I really appreciate you being on today's episode titled Customer Centricity, because I know this is a subject that's near and dear to your heart, just like it is to mine.
It is, yes.
Before we get started, I just want to ask you, how's life going? Like, how's adjusting to the pandemic? And for those who don't know, you've actually started a new role during this pandemic.
I mean, it's getting real. Like you said, I started a new role in the middle of the pandemic, which is an interesting choice. And I'm at AWS, which is known for a pretty competitive culture. And I'm also the mom of a 10-month-old baby girl. So quarantine has been very, fun, easy.
Easy. So tell us now how you really feel.
I'm really sick of Zoom jokes, and I'm having trouble finding humor in other ways.
I appreciate that. Hannah, one of my favorite things about you is you're just straight and honest and to the point. It's funny too, though, because I think I've experienced your experiences firsthand. I mean, we've had calls and trying to juggle a new job, new work, PreSales Collective, family at home. I mean, it's tough. Do you have any advice for anyone who's like trying to get through it? Because I know you're not alone in that scenario.
I mean, honestly, eye on the prize. I think that's good advice for pretty much any scenario in life, especially as a pre-sales professional. But even if you kind of get off track, as long as you're marching toward that outcome and you stay focused on that, it's all good.
Oh, that's great. I think mindset is such an important factor throughout this whole thing. I mean, the pandemic has been tough on everyone, no matter what. There's a lot happening in our world. I mean, there is a lot going on, and then just kind of keeping a positive mindset and making the best of the situation, I think, is the only way to get forward, because it's really easy to go down a pretty bad rabbit hole right now.
Yeah, sure is.
So tell me a little bit more about the new role at AWS. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so much. Super excited. It's actually really different for me. It's an interesting path that I've taken, because I like to joke with everyone that I grew up in the SaaS world. And when you're in the SaaS world, you have the benefit of when you're talking to a customer, IT comes in, they start diving deep into the weeds of your infrastructure. You can be like, "Oops, I'm going to stay up here and I'm going to call in our specialists." So kind of an interesting move, like I said, but now that I've actually dove headfirst into the world of infrastructure as a service, it's really fascinating. And 5 years ago, I don't even think I would picture myself saying that, but we go through, we are pre-sales people, we deliver these engineering architecture overviews, and now I actually can sort of understand what I've been saying all these years. So that's really good.
That's great. Tell us what the specifics of the role are, because you're technically not in pre-sales anymore.
Well, I technically think pre-sales is a mindset, and I'll tell you why. So as you mentioned, I'm moving into kind of a different role in the Executive Briefing Center, which for those of you who don't have an Executive Briefing Center at your company or aren't familiar with what that is, it's just this unique opportunity for you to bring a customer to a place where they can be matched with subject matter experts to deliver a bespoke presentation, be aligned with executives. And so that's all great face value. But I mean, this is such a unique opportunity, similar to a demo, for them to really experience your company and your culture. So what I'm looking at is how to take that experience to the next level. And I'm really applying everything that I've learned over the 8 years in pre-sales to do that and up-level the team.
Yeah, it's amazing. And really, you are in pre-sales. That was a setup question.
Oh, once in pre-sales, always in pre-sales.
Always.
Unless you move to the dark side of sales, which that's a whole another conversation.
That's a whole other subject. But I think it's been really great from my perspective, just talking you through your new opportunity and how you are putting that pre-sales lens on the Executive Briefing Center and rewiring potentially how they've done things traditionally. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you. I'm super excited about it.
Before we get into, a little bit more about your background and to get into today's topic of customer centricity, for those who don't know, Hannah is absolutely a key member of the PreSales Collective. She leads our Beyond the Demo bi-weekly newsletter, which is fantastic. You've really been a key member of the community since even before we started. So I just want to get your perspective on what this community means for you and why are you leaning in?
Well, I'm just going to be honest, since we're amongst friends here. For me, it really just started off as a networking opportunity. At the time in my previous role, I was really just looking for ways to introduce my team of pre-sales professionals who were new to the profession to a whole new world. What does pre-sales mean? But I think we've all learned from PreSales Collective, it means so much more than the technical disc jockey that comes in and does a demo. So it really started off that way, but I've kind of been fortunate to have this ride with you and have seen that this little community turned into 2,000 enthusiastic people, a lot of them really early on in their careers. For me now, it's really just about evangelizing the role because it was a game changer for my career. I'm lucky I landed into it by accident. And honestly, I wish this community existed for me years ago. It would have been just a sanity check, if nothing else.
We appreciate everything that you do. And I really enjoy working with you. Your work ethic's amazing. You push us to be better. Just so glad you're part of the community. So thank you. And I think one of the things is we've talked about this before. We wish this was there 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but unfortunately wasn't. But now's the time to give back and help those who were in our position and in our shoes years ago. One of the things that you have done with PreSales Collective is you hosted our Women in Solutions Excellence panel. And that was an amazing experience that's actually turned into a global program with the PreSales Collective. So tell us how you feel about that overall experience.
Well, first and foremost, I think the experience just at the beginning of it with other women in sales engineering at all, but then being exposed to women that are in senior leadership in sales engineering at companies like Salesforce, at DocuSign, that is a super rare opportunity because there aren't that many women and just there aren't that many opportunities to connect with executives at all. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is trying to look at how to get women more opportunities, like that opportunity gap that we talked a lot about in that webinar. And for me, being able to work with those women almost as a peer, because we were talking about how this needs to be a change, it needs to be a focal point of sales engineering. It really was a game changer for me. And then just having the opportunity to listen to their candid conversations about how they feel like imposters, they have felt like imposters, that's really powerful. And I just think that we don't get to talk about it enough.
Being part of the process myself, I thought it was fascinating and it's so great to see what's coming out of it. I want to talk about your career, right? You've said you've stumbled upon it. I did too. So tell us how you got into pre-sales.
Well, and actually, I love your story as well, but totally an accident. So this surprises actually everybody. And I don't really know why, but I was a dance major in college. And honestly, I took my first job that I found on Craigslist at an IT company in DC because all I wanted to do was save money to move to New York to become a professional dancer. So I never made it to New York, but I realized I loved health insurance and I liked making money. But I think like everyone else, really, I was sort of in the right place at the right time. I entered as an administrative assistant, and because of the growth of the company, I very quickly moved into being one of their software trainers. So that gave me the taste of traveling to customers, and it got me to realize how passionate I was about technology. And honestly, it was a shock to me. This led me to being actually in a professional services role for another company that ended up getting acquired by Oracle, which is massive. And so I was doing all of this work with our customers, and I happened to get assigned to a customer that was one of the biggest customers for Oracle. And, me being me and just loving the technology and really passionate about identifying use cases and building out requirements for our customers, this garnered attention from the sales team. And so one day I got a call from the director of pre-sales at Oracle, and if Darren Wilson, if you're listening to this, thank you. He was like, hey, I've heard good things about you. Would love to talk to you a little bit about pre-sales. Have you ever heard of sales engineering? And my response, I kid you not, was no, I hate salespeople, not interested. And he was like, hey, I think that there's something about the sales organization that you don't know. There's a role called pre-sales. And so long story short, we talked it out. I was like, okay, I'll give this a try. And that was 8 years ago. It was a great fit, and I haven't looked back.
That is a great story. And I love that you said that you hated salespeople. I mean, it's just, it's kind of ironic,
Yeah, I mean, has my response changed? I'm just kidding. I love salespeople. Love salespeople. My biggest learnings have been from salespeople.
Salespeople out there, we appreciate you. We really do.
We love you.
One of the things that resonates with me when you talk about dance and you talk about performance, when Brian Mazzaferri was on the podcast, he was talking about his experience as a musician, kind of helping him be front and center on stage, ready to go when it comes to a customer presentation and not necessarily feeling that pressure. Do you feel that you have some sort of correlation there from your experiences with dance to customer facing presentations?
100%. And I knew I liked Brian for a reason. So yeah, if you think about a demo, what is it? It's a performance. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have to be super invested in the audience. I think all of those skills, being comfortable in front of people, being comfortable with critical feedback. I think people that come from a fine arts background can totally relate to that. Those are skills that are just ingrained into them from day one.
I think that there's a podcast or a webinar with people from music or artistic backgrounds getting together to talk about that experience and how it relates, right? Because so many people are like, oh, I'm on a totally unrelated experience. I don't think I can ever make it to pre-sales. Like, you are a pure example that you can get there. So I love your story. I love your inspiration. It's great.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that would be great too, because honestly, we're trying to think about how to get more diversity into pre-sales. And I think that a lot of people hear the term sales engineer and they just get scared and they don't realize all these different components that make a great sales engineer. So yeah, I love that.
You're right. And you know what? They're probably scared of the word sales and they're scared of the word engineer. They're two different scary words. When you put them together, you really just don't know what it means. But it's the best profession in the world. I'm not biased at all, I promise.
I agree. And I'm not biased either.
Well, let's talk about one of both of our favorite topics, and customer centricity. I feel like if you read my LinkedIn post, I'm dropping customer centricity on almost everything. I love it. I love the term. I love the concept. And so we're going to dive deep into this concept, as I know you have a lot of experience here. What does customer centricity mean to you?
I really just think it literally means making it all about the customer. And it sounds pretty simple, right? But here's what I've observed working for a number of different companies. Every company says that they're customer-centric or customer-obsessed. But somehow, when they finally get to a meeting with a customer, all that comes across is that they are obsessed with themselves. So pre-sales engineers out there, tell me if you can relate to this. You got a demo. Generic pitch from the AE, all about how wonderful the company is. Gartner, Forrester, the product is the best ever. Sales engineer shows up. They do a standard demo flow, maybe a few use cases that are customized and built out. And then the AE is like, hey, customer, what should we do next? So to me, that scenario is super common. And there are a lot of reasons that things end that way. But one major call out is that it's not customer centric, because none of that's actually about the customer.
I love that you just gave that example, because how many times does that actually happen? And you're right. So many people say that they are customer centric, but your actions speak louder than your words. If you go in with that type of approach, I have my own feelings about the NASCAR slides. It doesn't show that you're here for them. And I think so many times, not only do companies get wrapped up in this and have this wrong, but sometimes sales engineers do too. I know that I did early on in my career. It was like, hey, it's the James show. I'm walking into this big meeting. This is my presentation. This is what I'm going to show. These are my favorite things to show. But sometimes I probably lost sight that it wasn't about me, but it was about the customer.
Yeah, it's hard too because, you want to go in and be the superstar, but that's not focusing on the business results. And that's what the customer cares about.
You lightly touched on it, but what is not a customer-centric experience?
Well, taking shortcuts. And so I think sales engineers too, because we work so closely with our sales counterparts, when we start talking to them about their strategy and how we're going to approach a demo or approach a conversation with a customer, like you start to get that icky feeling. And it's because you know that what you're about to present or what you're about to talk about, it's being self-serving. And a lot of times that's just, oh, come on, just show them a demo. All they asked for was a demo. And I know we've had a lot of conversations in PSC in general about discovery, but that is so important. Like to me, the differentiator for a sales experience is how you conduct discovery. I'm not talking about reading a checklist of questions that you found from somebody that gave them, talking about really listening and really asking questions that are agnostic of any technology and diving deep into the problems, because I guarantee you that is what's going to differentiate you from any competitor that walks in the door, even if their product has 1,000 more features than yours.
I love that because it's the truth. Amazon and Netflix have ruined everything for all of us because B2C is now evolving into B2B. And while it means that we have to change our approach, the people that we're pitching to need to change their approach to their customers. And I think sometimes those dots don't always get connected. So talk to me about how and why you think B2C is changing B2B.
Yeah, I think it's really funny that you just brought up the Amazon and Netflix examples because I probably use those two companies, and I work for Amazon, but I've used those two companies in almost every conversation with customer because it's so relatable. And actually, if you look at any sales pitch for a lot of these companies, well, I won't say any, but a lot of sales pitches, you'll see that a company tries to relate themselves or reference one of them because we all know that it's a superior customer experience. And I think in B2B selling, maybe a few years ago, it was kind of lagging behind a bit because B2B sales cycles are more complex. The tech stack can be more complex to talk about. The customer profile is not as clear cut, but they're really catching up. And many vendor presentations talk about how B2B is like B2C because it's the truth. And well, now that we have these great personal experiences at home, this impacts how we think about doing business, and it really just impacts our professional life too.
For sure. And like the modern buyer has changed. People do their homework. The internet has changed everything. People are more savvy than ever. So it is a really interesting experience.
Yeah, I think there's like a statistic out there that says that people in the world own more cell phones than they own toothbrushes.
I haven't heard that one. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about customer journey and customer centricity because it's easier said than done, as I mentioned. How do you make sure you're putting forth your best experience toward that customer's journey?
I think it comes down to preparation. It comes down to discovery. But when you're thinking about how your presentation is going to differentiate itself from any other presentation that customer is going to see, you need to put yourself into the shoes of your customer's customer. And I think we were just talking about that just a little bit. We all talk about storytelling now. Storytelling to me in pre-sales especially, and sales in general, it's all become just kind of like a buzzword. And how do we tell stories? But this is the easiest story to tell. If you put yourself into your customer's shoe, you can really tell a story and how your solution fits into that story. So let's talk about a couple of methods. If you're talking to your customer, if you're doing good discovery, you should at a minimum be able to understand who their ideal customer profile is. Sounds like a great place to start for a main character. And now that you have that main character and you think about all of the pain points that you know, and you think about what your solution does, what aspects of your product address those pain points? And then you really just take those and you make those into your story milestones. So this whole day in the life, really make it an actual day in the life. Think about what that means. If you're really thinking about the day in the life of the customer, it's not all happy. And just like all good stories, beginning, middle, end, there has to be an arc. There has to be a real problem. But I think what's really great about what we can do as storytellers and as pre-sales engineers is we can tell that story and we can land them softly into a happy ending so that they know that we see the world through their eyes. And I think that after that, you kind of earn the right to tell them how you do it. So you don't come out talking about you out the gate. You come out talking about them.
That's great. And there's a lot of questions that I want to ask you there because you made a lot of really good points. So what do you do where it seems like it's a really uphill battle to put in that much effort just for one presentation?
I would really ask yourself to take a good, hard look at actually what the truth could be behind that. Because if you think about it, yes, you're putting a lot of work up front, but you're telling this great story that's so relatable. You could tell it to executives. You could tell it to the lines of business. You could give it to your line of business and champions and have them communicate it up to executives who really aren't very close to the problems that you're trying to solve for. So you could do that, or you could spend your time doing a demo for an hour. And they're like, great demo. I need to show this to somebody else. You do another demo. Process repeats itself over and over again. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got from a leader was it takes just as much effort to close a $100,000 deal as it does to close $1 million deal. And I actually have experienced that now. And that was using the customer journey method. And it was actually easier because it's so much easier to communicate a story and to get somebody up to speed with a customer journey than it is with a demo.
I think you're exactly right when you talk about a $100,000 deal versus $1 million deal. I actually tell people too that sometimes you might have a $20,000 deal that is complex and it's complicated and it works just like that $100,000 deal. The reward isn't obviously as big at the end, but you still have to approach it with a specific manner.
And if you're approaching a $20,000 deal at face value, like a transactional deal, then you're not really leaving yourself open to the opportunity to see if there's something bigger there. If you're willing to accept that, then that's all you'll get. You know, I think one of the greatest feelings ever is when you get assigned to an opportunity. Oh, it's a big logo, but you know, it's kind of small, land and expand, but you take that and you can make that a $500,000 deal because you spent the time and the legwork and you made that happen. That is real strategic selling, and being a part of that as a sales engineer is one of the best rides you can take.
That sounds like a podcast I would love to listen to. We're talking about customer centricity and getting into a deal. But if you get into a deal and you just think that it's point solution A, when in reality, the opportunity might be solution B, C, D, and E, is there anything that you do to make sure that once you get involved, that we are encompassing that entire platform?
Certainly. Again, it goes back to discovery, because usually when you're really trying to sell into a very narrow window or through a narrow scope, if you start asking the right questions, somehow it really leads to, I don't know, that really falls into my counterpart court. And you're like, well, is it worth trying to get a conversation with them? Do they have a stake in this? Is it worth a conversation? What's their name? I mean, this is all where, and you think about the AE and the SE relationship, this is really where you can start taking on some of that strategic mindset and helping them navigate a very complex organization. You know, a lot of people who work strategic enterprise accounts, they'll work on one account. And this is how you really navigate your way through this complex web. And it's through discovery. You can't force your way through. It never ends well, in my experience.
Do you have any opinions on how you balance scalability and repeatability versus customer centricity and customization? Like, you could tell me, like, James, they're the same thing.
I treat every customer that comes across my desk equally. Now, of course, there is a matter of prioritizing your time and effort against lots of balancing priorities that you're going to have as a pre-sales engineer. But something like telling a story, especially once you have maybe a library of different stories that you've told, you can take those and very quickly repurpose those so that they become more scalable and you're not making them bespoke each and every single time. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely does. What advice do you have out there for people or SCs who want to be customer centric in environments that aren't really focused on that? They're going to be going against the grain and they'll probably face some resistance from AEs, from sales leaders.
So I'm going to have to give a shout out to Amazon because they're very strong in their leadership principles. And one of my favorite ones that they have is have a backbone and commit. You know what you're doing. Be relentless and show results, because you only need to be right once for everyone to get behind it. And if you know you're doing the right thing, just show what good looks like. Over communicate what you are doing. Be your own advocate. And I think that really is what makes the difference between a senior SC and a leader SC. And I think the more that you learn how to do that, the more you will be forced to grow. You don't grow without a little bit of pain. I think we can all go back to like the weightlifting analogy, which I have not been doing very much of in the pandemic.
Speaking of a pandemic, how have customer expectations changed during this time?
In my opinion, I just think they expect even more so for you to be customer centric and for you to be flexible, right? I mean, we've all had to pivot to virtual. We can't go meet with them, which means that their time is even more valuable. So don't waste it. And don't waste your own showing something that you know isn't meaningful to them. So I think it's just amplified it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I also feel like everyone has Zoom fatigue. It's not just us that work in tech. It's all these people that are buying as well. They might not necessarily be used to buying over video as much as they are now. And in that case, I feel like people have less patience and you only have a tight window in terms of making an impact and actually getting their attention, because due to everything happening right now, I can't say people are all focused on buying. I think we're a little bit further in the pandemic and people are maybe going back to normalish, but your window of opportunity, it has definitely shifted for sure.
To your point, you're competing even more because I think now, especially sitting kind of on the other side, on the customer side, and actually sitting in the customer's shoes of evaluating software right now, I do think that something to keep in mind is that generally speaking, a software evaluation is not their only job. Even more so now, just how everything's changed and people are wearing 17,000 hats. That's even more the truth. So you need to really make sure that you're maintaining focus on them and helping them deliver results, because they're going to have to deliver results with or without you.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you said that this isn't their full-time job, right? I think sometimes we forget when we're selling, especially tech sellers, we're like, oh yeah, these people are just going to own this system. This is all they care about. This is going to be their entire world. Well, maybe for only a few systems or platforms out there, for a majority of people, they still have their day job, right? And this is a key component of it. Or maybe it helps them get the next promotion, or maybe it helps them get their bonus, but it's probably not going to be their entire world. And you're going to have to really sell them on that because they get a lot of other things on their mind, especially right now.
Absolutely.
You mentioned being on the customer side of things and evaluating technology. Are you evaluating any technologies in your current role?
Yes.
I want to ask you, what are people doing that are really resonating with you?
Right now, I think there's a lot of room for improvement, to be honest with you. And I think that everybody is just scrambling and doing the best that they can. But I'll just spell it out for you. In order to make any changes in a mature company like Amazon, there has to be a business case, not fluffy things, not things that come off of marketing slides. I'm talking about real hard numbers. And I know that when I was in the sales engineering shoes, every time business case came up, I got kind of a knot in my stomach, because for a lot of systems, they're kind of like soft ROI metrics, like efficiency gains and things like that. It's hard to articulate, but now is the time to lean in, because especially right now with so many competing priorities, that's really what everybody's focused on. And that's a language that everybody down from me up to the very top of the Amazon executives can get behind.
We're ending on that. That was a drop the mic moment. That was fantastic. I love that, Hannah. You're absolutely right. And you're definitely true. And I really appreciate your perspective. I love that you're on the other side, so to say, of the customer experience at this point. I love that you're in the briefing center, and I can't wait to hear what the next 6 to 12 months look like for you and do a bit of a follow-up in terms of how you've changed things at AWS.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to be back on.
Well, how we usually end is I will ask you 2 questions to get your perspective on, and we'll kind of start there. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. The first one, Hannah, is what is your favorite thing about the pre-sales role?
Oh my gosh, customers. And it's always been the customers. As sales engineers, it gets really stressful. We do so many different things. But when you walk into the room and you immediately can gain that trusted advisor status, or now let's dial into Zoom. So I'm going to make a Zoom joke. But, it takes a while to really get your groove. So I don't want people that are newer to pre-sales or people that just moved into a new pre-sales role at a new company to think that they need to get there right away. It takes time. Give yourself time. But once you get there, it's like the best feeling ever. It's like being rock star status.
It is. I love it. Second question and last question for you. What advice do you have for people that are really trying to make an impact in this role?
Just remember, you are the smartest person in the room. And if you walk in with that mentality, everyone else will meet you right there.
Hannah, thank you so much for your time today. I love talking about customer centricity.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck in the role. Best of luck at home, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
Wow. Thanks for listening, PreSales Collective. I really enjoyed talking about customer centricity. I'll continue to post about it on LinkedIn, but really we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg on this subject. I love Hannah's passion around it and her energy toward it. Right before we started, she told me that someone at one of her previous companies that she's never met informed her that she's quote unquote famous for all the customer journey mapping documentation that she's made. She also doesn't know that I'm saying this. One of the things that I really like that Hannah talked about is put yourself in the shoes of your customer's customer. I think that's really important and not something that we do all the time. Another takeaway is discovery is one of the most customer-centric sales motions that you can actually use. So use it. And B2C experiences have changed and altered how B2B works for all of us, whether we want it to or not. It really has. Next time you have Netflix, next time you're on Amazon, something that's super easy, just think that is what our customers expect from our own sales processes. And I want to leave you with this. I would like to challenge everyone listening to ask themselves, are you really being customer centric? Is it really about your customer? Is it really about your customer's customer? And if it's not, what are some things that you could do to change that? We can all improve. We can all get better. So if there's anything I ask you to take away from today, ask yourself, do some self-reflection, and try to action on that. All right, everybody. Thank you for your time today. Subscribe and follow to get a new podcast next Monday. Introduce yourself on Slack, read a blog article, and we hope to see you on a webinar soon. Take care.